There are a number of different stages of legislation, including first reading, second reading, committee of the whole, and third reading. But right now I want to focus on first reading. The term reading comes from the original House of Commons, where printing was a challenge, and so the bill was actually read in its entirety by the clerk. First reading today is really just about the member's ability to introduce a piece of legislation inside the House. Nobody else except for the member has seen that piece of legislation, so it's introduced without debate and voted upon, allowing the member to proceed to second reading.
Bill 10, Alberta Personal Income Tax Amendment Act 2019 is now read a first time.
One thing that's important to know is that if at any stage of the legislation it does not pass a positive vote through the legislature, that bill is no longer eligible to become law and falls off the order paper. Second reading is what some would say is the most important stage of legislation, and it is often considered to be that because members will debate the principles of the bill or the idea of the bill on balance. The principles of the bill are very important because it sets out the parameters in which the legislation may be able to be amended at later stages of the bill.
Having moved second reading of Bill 10, Alberta Personal Income Tax Amendment Act 2019. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for second reading? Please say aye.
Aye. The other thing that is very interesting about stages of legislation is each stage can only take a minimum of 1 day. First reading requires a day, second reading requires a day. Committee of the whole not considered to be a stage of the bill, so it can take place on the same day as second or third reading, but it's very important to note that these stages of the legislation must take place on alternative days. Committee of the whole is not considered to be a stage of the bill, but really a process that takes place where the legislature dissolves into committee, and at that committee, any member can provide an alternative idea, and that comes in the form of an amendment. These amendments are debated on, some will be accepted, some will not be accepted, and at the end of committee, that committee will report back to the legislature a amended bill for then the committee and the legislature to go on and debate in third reading.
Shall the bill be reported? Are you agreed? Agreed. Opposed? Carried.
Third reading is the last and final reading of a piece of legislation. It gives members of the Assembly one last kick at the can to debate the overall principles of the legislation and for the Assembly to make a final decision on whether or not this is a good piece of legislation or not something that is in the best interest of the province of Alberta. It's typically the shortest stage of debate, as so much debate has taken place at second, committee, and now third reading.
An Alberta Personal Income Tax Amendment Act 2019 is now read a third time.
One thing that often members of the Assembly will do at third reading is use many procedural amendments in order to delay it if they have strong feelings about the particular piece of legislation. Third reading, at the end of the day, is the stage of the bill that determines whether or not this will become law of the province of Alberta. At the conclusion of third reading, that piece of legislation is then passed on to the Lieutenant Governor, who provides royal assent, which is a ceremony that actually makes that piece of legislation become law. These are the stages of legislation.